Hello and welcome. I'll be interviewing Andy White, a gentleman that's been developing boulders in the Okanagan for well over a decade. A handful of those boulders are considered some of the hardest in Canada, being in the V13 to 14 range. You can find these lines in the Okanagan Bouldering book that he authored, a book that's brought thousands of climbers to well over 1,000 boulders. Not only that, he founded the Okanagan Bouldering Society and the Rock the Blocks Comp that's held at the Kelowna Boulder Fields every year. Andy has generously agreed to sit down with me for a few hours to ask him a wide range of questions, which I shall cut to now. What subjects do you teach?
I run the international program here.
Okay.
I'm gonna put this here just in case. I grew up trained for socials and PE,
Okay.
and then I got that job actually when I started, and then government changes happened and cuts happened, and there were no jobs really. So all that was left was the international program, and
Gotcha.
I was like, okay, I'll try it, and I haven't really looked back since then.
That's
so
fair.
it's almost 17, 18 years.
What age groups would you be dealing with?
So I deal with, so I'm the district vice principal, so I actually deal with all international students in all the district.
Gotcha.
And we do everything from kindergarten to grade 12, but most of our kids they're mainly grade 10 to 12.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if most people would know that about you. I certainly didn't.
Yeah, no, most people
Yeah.
don't. I think maybe locals that like you talk to more, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, climbing was always it's hard to make money in climbing.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like always more of a passion than anything, and I think it's actually good that it was that way, because if it's the job, then it can be
A bit much, eh?
yeah, it can be tricky.
All-consuming.
Yeah, and tough on the body too. Like I remember like doing a lot of route setting and then trying to climb a lot and trying to climb hard, and talking to a lot of guys like that were kind of some of the first to do that in other parts of North America, and they would always say their bodies just got beat up so bad.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you say bodies, you talking pulleys, joints? Are we talking like?
Yeah, I mean they would get injured from overuse.
Yeah.
Pulleys, I think a lot of the time pulleys are probably somewhat like mechanical. So like I've never had a pulley injury before,
Wow.
but people I know have one every year still.
Gotcha.
And they've been climbing for 20 plus years. I think it was just bodies like being sore, tired, and not having enough rest to be able to try really hard, so. And then skin too, like if you're inside climbing all the time and then you try and go climb outside and do something hard, it's maybe when you're really young it's okay, but as you get a bit older it's tough. Yeah.
I wonder if you did a bit of trad climbing for your first 3 years, right?
Yeah, first longer than that even.
I wonder if that kind of bulletproofed your tendons, gave them enough time before you went hard with the bouldering.
Yeah, it could be. I think it could be part of it. I think growing up on the coast and being close, a lot of it down there is granite and good granite. It taught me to move better, like more technically, and you climb on slab and you're climbing on not much for feet.
Yeah.
But maybe jamming your fingers in a crack when you first start climbing a lot just gets your fingers ready. I think though too, like guys that I know started trad climbing, then sport climbing, then bouldering, and I think some people they pull really hard without knowing when to let go sometimes. I think that might be part of it too. So there might be like a physical, mechanical piece and then also a mental piece to it.
I could see that.
Yeah. Because I always, if I started to feel a twinge, I would just let go.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
Give it a bit.
The one friend I have who tries the hardest of anybody I know is generally the more injured guy too.
Yeah.
So knowing when to let go can be valuable.
Totally. Yeah. I think you got to try that hard sometimes to be able to climb hard. But I would definitely, I see some of the guys that they do warm up and stuff, but they start pulling way harder quicker than I do usually.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe that's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say you have a kind of a longer warm up than most people then?
No, honestly, my warm up's terrible.
Okay.
I typically warm up on whatever I'm projecting.
Yeah.
Actually, if there's an actual warm up nearby, I'll do some laps on that. Well, maybe not a warm up, but something nearby that's not too bad and gets you moving a bit. I'll usually do some laps But then pretty quickly I get on to whatever the project is, and I just start weighting holds and stretching mainly my fingers and core out on that. Yeah.
I have basically the same approach too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find like on it, a lot of the guys around here that have climbed the hardest stuff kind of all eventually develop that approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like you could do a lot of laps on easier stuff, but I don't know that at some point, if you're not really engaging your fingers and your core and getting ready to go, I don't know if you're really in a good spot yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it almost seems like it saves time as well. Simply weighting holds, being in positions on the project. Because you're warming up exactly what you need to be warm.
Totally.
And it's not like you have to go from 0 to 100. It's very easy to kind of incrementally weight yourself more and more in those positions.
Yeah, and then you start like, I don't know if you do it, but I start, like I'll weight the holds and then I start moving through the hold.
Yeah.
Like engaging the core into the foot, like doing those types of things so that by the time you're actually pulling, you've already done a fair bit of moves.
Yeah.
And you haven't wasted a ton of skin, hopefully, either.
As well, it almost, it doesn't add to your skill necessarily, but it gets you, the movement becomes a bit more ingrained. Like if you're warming up on that movement, by the time you actually want to climb it at your max, power potential, you're going to be more fluid, I think.
Yeah,
so,
I agree totally. I think that's still what I do at this point. Yeah, yeah,
definitely. Well, one of the introductory questions I had was why climbing?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like so many other sports, so many other things you could do.
Yeah, well, I grew up not climbing. I grew up playing almost everything else except hockey.
Okay.
So, yeah, on the coast we had a very strong school sports culture. So volleyball, basketball, football in the community.
Right.
And fast pitch was actually my main sport. So I played that all the way through till like junior A.
Okay.
Until we were pretty much too old. At the top level in Canada, actually, from the time I was about 12 until I was 23-ish.
Wow.
So that was kind of the main sport for me. And all the other sports around that were really fun too. But I think with climbing, it's one of those things where at the time there was a climbing gym in Abbotsford, and at that time there were hardly any gyms on the coast.
Okay.
Like you had Maple Ridge had a gym, you had the Edge back then in North Vancouver.
No hive gyms?
No hive gyms.
Okay.
Cliffhanger was in Poco. Like Surrey had a gym. Like there weren't many around.
Right.
But and they were old school. And so we tried it in high school with like outdoor ed classes and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And it was fun. But then it wasn't until university that I started getting in more regularly to the gym a bit. But really started climbing outside more in the Fraser Valley and then out into Squamish. And that's when I really fell in love. And that was like probably when I was 18, 19.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then before I moved here, I also started kind of hearing a little bit about the bouldering because a couple of the guys that I went to university with are very well known. Well, one owns multiple gyms down there now, but the other, they were very high level comp climbers. And they were developing boulders in the Fraser Valley, and that kind of got me into developing a bit.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then when I moved here, it just kind of took off.
For sure.
Yeah.
Did you get more fulfillment from developing, you think, than just standard bouldering?
Yeah.
Climbs?
Man, that's a good question. I think I get more fulfillment from being outside climbing than I think almost any other sport I've done.
Okay.
Like being in the gym, not my jam. I have never really enjoyed it, and I suck at it, really. And but being outside, doing most things, I've always just been happier. And then climbing and the kind of the problem-solving aspect of it, the difficulty of bouldering, like it just, I don't know why, but it really grabbed me. That I can get my ass kicked for 3 years straight on a climb and get more fulfillment than I do with most other things.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you got to have a weird mindset to be. I think there's so many strong people out there, but they just don't want to get beat down all the time.
Yeah.
To get to that really like next level of something. So For me, that still pushes me now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate. I mean, it's a tough spot to be when you're like a dozen sessions into something, and the amount of progress you've made in the last 6 have been maybe 2% or something like that.
Or go backwards.
That too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, it's I don't know why. Just stubborn. I'm stubborn as hell, right? So I think you have to have a little bit of that in you to enjoy that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see. I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of all the strongest climbers are probably the most stubborn as well.
Probably, yeah. I think there's a piece of that to most of that group, and like maybe bucking the trend a little bit, and not always needing the affirmation of the send. I think that process is what fulfills a lot of people that climb really hard stuff too.
For sure.
At times, I mean, I think you need to have both of those things. I think if you're not sending, then it becomes a bit depressing. So, yeah, you got to mix it up.
For sure. It also can help to have a long view of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you may be failing now, but as long as you can keep in check that logically you're pushing yourself to your max, you know your body's going to be stronger over time.
Yeah.
And eventually, hopefully at least, something happens that's
totally
pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and it happens like when you're not like, climbing's not your job, and it's not something that you are constantly able to train for, do all that. Like we do a fair bit, but you just don't send those really hard things as quickly as some other people do. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to be okay with not doing it very often.
For sure.
But when it happens, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do your parents or family understand kind of your passion for climbing?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
No, well, not really. Both of my parents were like, they're very all through growing up, it was hunting, fishing, like tons of time outdoors, archery. Yeah. So they have their own passions in the outdoor realm, but as far as climbing, they understand it now, but they don't understand the desire or the like push and the sacrifices and all those types of things that came with climbing a lot and climbing harder.
For sure. Kind of the obsession side of it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think probably my dad does a bit more because he's like extremely obsessed with fishing, hunting, archery, those types of things. So he gets that mindset, but specifically with climbing, no, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're like, hey, mom, dad, I sent this like V13, 14,
is
that just going right over
their
head?
They have no idea. Yeah. You have to like explain the whole grading scale and
for sure.
Yeah, what that involves, and like they've both come out before, like to the boulder fields, and a lot of people don't understand why we climb the hardest side of a boulder, right? So
yeah. Why can't you just walk up the back?
Totally. And they do, of course. They always walk around the back and stand up top, and inevitably somebody's going to say, "Oh, why didn't you just go this way?"
yeah. I've had that happen before. For sure.
Totally. Yeah. Or what's that thing on your back? Why are you bringing your bed into here? All that kind of fun stuff. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think though with the movie Free Solo as well as the Olympics, I've noticed that more often hikers ask less of those types of questions and are more interested at least in like you know, you're bouldering, are you sport climbing, are you doing something crazy?
I think it's more mainstream now than it was, right? Like I think back to 15 plus years ago, and you go even places that were popular climbing destinations in other parts of North America, and you would hear those questions all the time.
For sure.
Yeah.
That being said too, your parents likely would have seen that you started the Okanagan Bouldering Society, the Rock the Blocks competition.
Yeah.
This like amazing guidebook.
Right.
Like,
thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, like amazing guidebook. Gotta say that.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
They must be quite proud of all that impact that you've done, even if they don't necessarily understand. What it is.
No, I think I've been lucky all my life. I've had a really good support system and lots of good support from them. I think, you know, whether that's like in my professional world, whether that's in climbing or other sports. I mean, like when I was playing ball all over Canada, they would most of the time they'd be there at those tournaments too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, no, they they get it. They like the fact that I'm constantly kind of pushing forward.
For sure.
Yeah.
That also brings up another question. Where does the motivation come from to put so much energy into the community? Like so many climbers, let's say they walk up to a boulder, they see a terrible landing, they maybe climb their thing and then they just move on.
Yeah.
It's like a different mindset to be like, oh, maybe I'll make it a hair better, or maybe I'll make an insanely sick guidebook, or
right.
this competition, or
Yeah, I think there's a lot of places where that probably comes from. I think there's the piece of, there were people that did that for us. I mean, climbing wasn't, especially bouldering, wasn't super popular when I started doing it, but there were people that had gone and done the trail work, had created the infrastructure to start areas or let you get going, right?
Yeah.
And I appreciated that, and also came from a family that coached us when we were young, that put time back into the community. Like my dad's, he's got archery shoots in the US named after him, and
right.
he's put a lot back into the community. So I saw that as partly a role model. So there was that aspect of things. And again, like, I just loved being outside and saw the enjoyment of community.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's some selfishness there as like fulfillment for me too, right? Because I got to see what everybody else was enjoying.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and I think it builds a bit of a buzz that continues to build, and it's like a cyclical thing, right? It's like a positive feedback loop that maybe at some point it gets too big. Like I think in a lot of places it's getting that way, but I think that it felt good, and there was a really good group of people that latched onto that made it fun.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's a saying, happiness is best shared.
Yeah.
So
totally, and I was lucky. Like the group of people, it's funny in climbing, I think sometimes the group of people that you really connect with are not people you would normally connect with outside of climbing.
Yeah.
And I would say that of the development group that did a lot of the work around here, that's the case. But really, we really enjoyed doing what we were doing, and like kind of pushed each other. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So you had like a bit of a tight-knit group that you're developing?
Yeah, I'd say, like, so I'm not part of OBS anymore.
Okay.
And there's been politics. So I'm not involved with any of that stuff anymore. But at the time that we created those things and the momentum that was building, that group was really tight-knit. And I'd say, like, any given day you'd go to the boulder fields and there'd be 10 people, and they're almost always the same 10 people.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And some days you were doing your own thing, sometimes everybody was together.
Okay.
Same in Cougar Canyon. Like when we started developing in Cougar Canyon, there was only a handful of problems in there.
For sure.
Now there's hundreds, right? So yeah, it was kind of throughout the whole valley. There was a really good group of developers before us that they did amazing work.
Kind of paved the way.
They did. And like the South Okanagan was, like, a lot was developed before we ever got there. Okay. And in the boulder fields, there was a good start. Cougar, same kind of thing, like a good start as well. But that group really just took off with it. Yeah. Interesting.
Would you say you're happy with where the community has gone locally?
That's a loaded question.
Well, we don't have to get into it, but
no. I think there's been some things that I was really not happy with. Okay. I think that as any climbing area grows, there's going to be a disconnect typically with people who develop the area and maybe a newer generation of climbers. And I think that's partly what's happened a bit here, is there's a different mindset with some things.
Okay.
Not everyone, of course, but like you mentioned before, like people that just walk by a boulder and don't try it because of a landing, or now maybe more so walking by a boulder without picking up the rocks that are lining the trail that everybody's walked over, and now they're laying in the middle of the trail.
Right.
Back in the day, that would all be done by the people that were developing the area, plus more, right? It's always an added to. But I think, as any area grows, like there's holds that have been maybe manufactured a bit more. There's landings that have been dug out that kind of provide access to a different experience on boulders now. There's
Okay.
all those types of things, right? So
Right.
I think it's inevitable with the growth of areas. I've seen it in pretty much every major area that I've been to.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough to go to many from before they were big. And then you see what they look like after. So I think as you get older and if you were one that put all that work into it, to see that happening is pretty hard.
Yeah.
And I think I struggled with that a lot. And other people maybe weren't so willing to deal with it or say anything about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
If I could think of an analogy, it would maybe be like a guy has worked his whole life to buy the classic car of his dreams.
Yeah.
And maybe he lets his friends or family use it. They're leaving trash in there.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
not putting gas in the tank.
Yeah.
They're kind of subtly disrespecting
Yeah.
this thing that means a lot to you.
yeah, it's very much so. And I think too, like you see it in other places everywhere. Like there's an initial group of people that do that development, that put like heart and soul into it. But the people that come after, there's tons of amazing people that are still climbing the community here. But
Yeah.
there's, I think, a disconnect from an understanding and appreciation of what was done before,
Okay.
which then means that you don't necessarily always respect it the same.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm seeing now come here, which we knew eventually would. It's just hard to deal with.
Right. Do you think there's anything that could be done about that to improve it?
I think it's always education, right? I think there are people that are in the community right now that are still running clinics. I ran a clinic earlier this year again, and other people are doing that good work to educate people when they get outside, and I think that is important. I think a lot of it, we talk about it all the time, is the gym to crag mentality. I think there's a disconnect between a lot of people learn in the gym now, and then they go to the outdoor space, and there's not a lot of mentorship. And I think some gyms do a good job of it, or try to.
Yeah.
I think other gyms are more worried about not putting any kind of imposition on their members, because they make money from that, right? So I think there's a disconnect sometimes there. And when you go, especially I see it every spring, and I see it here in Cougar Canyon because it's one of our big first areas that opens. People come out of the gym, tons of new climbers, and they come out in groups of 20 with really no mentorship at all, and it's a mess. So
I see.
Yeah.
Well, in a gym, you're paying to go use a facility, and that money is going to pay employees to clean up right after you.
Yeah.
And then that's not the case outside.
No, exactly. And I think too, gyms have their own stuff going on, and I think certain gyms have certain they've got a community and a feeling to them that it's not always conducive to respecting the outdoor spaces.
Okay.
Yeah. And some do try, and they do a fairly good job of like actually getting their staff out to train people outdoors and like show that these people that a lot of indoor climbers look up to actually really care about the outdoor spaces.
Yeah.
And I think what happened probably 5-6 years ago is a lot of the people that used to be involved in the gyms that developed the outdoor space were no longer involved, and there was a bit of a vacuum there.
Gotcha.
And I'm sure that's happened in other places too. Yeah.
Well, in a short summary of what we've just expressed, what would be an ideal, respectful way to go about a bouldering session in Cougar or Kelowna Boulder Fields?
I think like what a lot of people don't always think about is that not every area has the same ethics to them, right? Even here, we have different land managers in different areas. So Cougar Canyon is a provincial park. Ellison's a provincial park. The Boulder Fields is a recreation site, which is a different group in the government that manages that. And Pebble Beach in Kelowna and the ruins are regional parks. Okay. So they all have different land managers, and they don't always all have the same expectations or same ethics.
Yeah.
So I think understanding that and trying to know what you should and shouldn't be doing in those areas is a good start.
Right.
Looking for mentors is another good place. Like, we try and take out people all the time to just kind of show them what it's like, also for safety, right? Like, just to say,
Yeah.
here's an outdoor space that is not the indoor space.
Definitely.
There's a big difference here, and especially in a place like the Boulder Field, it's not the safest place to be climbing all the time. So
Yeah.
and if that's, if mentorship's not available, then guidebooks usually provide a fairly good idea of what the ethics are, local ethics. Local developers can tell you. But being educated and informed, I think, is lacking in some places these days, and I think that's a really good place to start. And honestly, a lot of people do. Like, a lot of people are really good about it. In places where you're supposed to have a dog on a leash, they have their dog on a leash, right?
Yeah.
And or places where there's sensitive vegetation, they don't have 20 pads down on the ground and all their stuff scattered everywhere. A lot of people are really good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, read Andy White's guidebook. I know some people have this book. They haven't read the introduction or even.
Oh man, it happens all the time.
Like there's so much gold in there, and also
thanks.
it plays into the ethics as well.
Yeah.
Like when I went to Pebble Beach, there's a bit of a description.
Yeah.
In the beginning of that chapter, kind of describing the land use.
Yeah.
And what to expect.
Yeah. No, and like Pebble Beach, for example, has really sensitive kokanee spawning grounds.
Okay.
And so if certain times a year, if people have their dogs running around all over the beach, and I think you should say it in the guidebook, right? Then it can be an issue for access in the future. And that's actually a very sensitive area for access right now. So, yeah. And there is a new guidebook coming out too.
Awesome. People will be very excited to hear that.
Yeah. There's 3 guidebooks coming out because it's too big to put in one book now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we dividing cougar from the fields?
Yeah, it'll be, the way the book is now is separated into 3 sections. So those 3 sections will be 3 separate books.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a North Okanagan, Central Okanagan, and South Okanagan.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
So there's like 1,800 problems in the current book. In the 3 subdivided versions, like what kind of increase are we talking about in terms of climb?
Oh man, good question. So I think there's at least, if I remember right, the mapping of the fields would add 12 to 14 entire new zones.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so hundreds of problems there.
Interesting.
The South Okanagan is not going to change much,
Okay.
to be honest. There's been development, but development that's kind of quiet.
Gotcha.
And the North Okanagan will have hundreds more problems added to. Cougar Canyon's seeing a bit of a renaissance in development right now.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are you leading that renaissance or?
Yeah, there's a few people in there right now that are cleaning new problems, finding them like really good hard problems too.
That's awesome.
Are
we talking like, because I've been there I think once or twice.
Yep.
You have the main area.
Yep.
It seemed like the boulders were somewhat scattered. So the new areas.
Yeah, so there's new zones not in the current guidebook. That adds actually not a ton of new problems.
Okay.
But within the zones that are in the current book, there's a whole bunch of stuff that just wasn't developed. Because the way we used to do it is climbing cougar in the spring. As soon as the weather was good and the fields road opened up, we would go to the boulder fields and develop like crazy in there.
Okay.
And the approach we took in there was to really kind of get into all the caves and look at everything, really. But we didn't necessarily take that same approach in cougar. We climbed a lot of what was big and obvious.
Okay.
But it actually has a ton of stuff left that is like what we would climb in the boulder fields. It's like good, hard, steep climbing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. So it's been fun, actually. Like, it's closer to home and the road's better on the car.
Definitely.
Yeah. And, aside from the real hot piece of the summer, it's been a really good year.
Do you have any maybe funny stories in relation to that Boulder Fields road, or have you gone through any suspension parts on the way? Or?
Oh, I think we all have at some point. Yeah. I think there came a point when we all started buying vehicles that would withstand that road a bit.
Right.
I've blown leaf springs and suspensions out of multiple vehicles there.
Fair.
Took a radiator out once. That was in the parking lot though, so that was actually slightly embarrassing.
What
But
about
yeah,
winter? Did you ever try and make it up there in the winter and
we
maybe get stuck or something?
yeah, we used to go most of the time in the winter, especially if they weren't logging, you could only get up to where the new mountain bike parking is.
Right.
If you got past that, because it was so steep and it was like usually packed down pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't get past that. But if they were logging, you could get up to the KVR turnoff sometimes, and that would be covered in snow. And I think most of the years it still is because they don't plow that. And so yeah, most people go up there somebody will start going up in early March and start trying to make it in.
Yeah.
And every year almost it seems somebody gets stuck down trying to go down to the parking lot. I haven't, because as soon as I saw snow there, I knew my vehicles probably wouldn't make it in.
Right.
So we would walk in though from the junction of the KVR and the Forest Service Road.
Okay.
Just to see, and like the boulders were usually, there's always snow in spots, but if you were able to walk in, you could probably climb.
Nice.
Stuff at the top was usually something would be dry and climbable early.
Right.
Yeah, but it's tough when like that time of year, cougars just getting into like really prime conditions.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So there's not like a huge reason to keep pushing it up there anyway.
No, I think it like maybe depends on if all your projects are in the fields, maybe you would want to do that. But really we're really lucky seasonally here. You could climb almost all year here, and if you're willing to brave the cold a bit, but
For sure.
yeah,
And
Pebble
the heat.
and the heat at times, yeah. Pebble and the South Okanagan get good early in the season, then Cougar, and then the fields, and then we kind of do it in reverse on the way back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great system.
We're lucky, man. Like it's really good. There's not a lot of like major development happening in a lot of places that are well known still in the Okanagan. There's other areas we're developing right now that are kind of lower key. So yeah, it's kind of like a well-known rotation of the year, and
Definitely.
yeah, keeps people going.
Do you ever throw sport climbing in the mix or trad these days?
No, never really. Like I had my fall in Cougar a long time ago now. And that kind of put me off of trad climbing.
Okay. Did you break any bones?
Yeah,
or?
lots. Yeah. Like my left side was pretty messed up.
Oh,
all
wow.
the way up.
So this was like quite a tall fall here.
Yeah, I had like, it was what we understood was as a clean route, but it was a pretty dirty route at the time.
Okay.
And I had some gear pop and hit a couple ledges as I fell. So we were lucky. I was on the second pitch, so I went down below the belay ledge.
Okay.
About 50 feet or so. So I was pretty messed up and did a helicopter ride to the hospital from there to there. And
Interesting.
yeah, it was kind of what started getting me into bouldering. And then like hardly any of the bouldering around here had been touched at that point. So
Yeah.
we just were lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time to have that big boom.
For sure.
Yeah.
What was that recovery time like?
I think I was in a wheelchair for a bit. Thinking like it was at least 6 months of doing pretty much nothing.
Okay.
Because I think if I remember right, I was not until the fall. I got hurt in this early spring. It wasn't until the fall I was able to kind of start. Yeah, that's right. Wasn't able to start kind of doing much activity till then. And then took a while to build it up, and that's when I started getting into bouldering more in the old Beyond the Crux in Kelowna.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Were these more like lower body mostly? Like, could you do any hangs? Were you even
Yeah,
interested in
no,
doing
I
hangs?
didn't have a hangboard or anything at that time. And I don't know, you've probably read, at the time we were living in Braden, in Braden McRae's, in Rochelle McRae's basement, right up there. And he had just put a wall up outside the basement suite that we were renting.
Gotcha.
And that's how we met him. And if you look at the things that he's done in the last number of years, he's one of the last guys that's still putting up the hardest routes around here. But they were all climbing on those things, and I was hanging on like some holds, but I didn't have a hangboard or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Braden McRae. I saw he put up Chuck Norris. I think it was like last fall.
Yep. Yeah, a couple years ago.
Oh, was it years?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he did Bearden of Dreams too.
Sick.
Yeah, that one's also really hard. Yeah, he has a similar style of climbing to, well, we train together most of the winter and stuff on our wall at home. So he's got a similar interest and style of climbing as I do.
That's great.
And both of those lines are lines that I had cleaned up and like tried a little bit over the years, and then just never really got back to because I was distracted with other stuff.
That's fair.
Yeah, but yeah, he's still going hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has he tried No More Mr. Nice Guy at all, or is that on his list, you think?
Yeah, he's tried. He's gone at it pretty good. There was a year where there's a trail if you go from No More Mr. Nice Guy down to Slippery.
Okay.
And so he would go down and work Slippery and then run up and get onto Nice Guy. And like, if you know, I don't know if you've seen Slippery.
I have seen it.
Okay, yeah. So, and it broke over a number of years ago, so now it's actually a little harder. So that one and the low to that one are both very hard. And then Nice Guy's obviously really hard. So he's actually put some solid work into both of those lines, which is great because in the last number of years, man, they're just not getting any love.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad.
That is.
Yeah.
And any thoughts as to why? Like, there's lots of strong people in Squamish. They're 5 hours away.
Yeah.
Like,
I think I have a lot of thoughts on this matter. We're located just a little too far from the major centers, right?
Okay.
So Leavenworth seems to draw everybody in for the early spring. And then once the weather starts getting good in Squamish is when the weather gets good in the fields.
Gotcha.
And I think that Squamish is better known. It's a style that some people like, right? Like if you think about gym climbing now, a lot of people, well, not the parkour style stuff, but a lot of open-handed grips, right? And a lot of squeezing, and Squamish is like that. So I think that some people like the style there more. And honestly, it's just easier. Like if you go to Squamish, you go to Leavenworth, go to the Kootenays, it's easy to get in. The landings are good in most cases. And the Boulder Fields is not that, unfortunately. So, and then the road too. So you got to do the drive and then you got to drive the road.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I think actually it seems like there's been a decrease in the last 3 or 4 years of really strong people coming to try the really hard stuff here.
Okay.
Which could be partially because a lot of the guys that develop those things are not as active and in promoting as much anymore.
Gotcha.
I think there's people that are climbing some of the stuff up to like maybe our harder 11s now, and that seems to be where you get a lot of the bigger sends.
Right.
So it's been a few years since we had even a 13 done that I know of in there.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, though. No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's like 55 degrees overhung, but very board-like.
Yeah.
And I think board climbing is becoming more and more popular.
True. Yeah.
At least when I saw it, I was like, this looks like a mega board problem that I would love to get on. I did all the moves except for the crux.
Yeah.
As well as setting up just before the crux.
Yeah, and
that
you're taller,
so hard.
It's probably heinous for you.
So heinous.
I think there's some guys that have some very strong climbers from the US and Canada have tried that climb.
Yeah.
And their height is almost perfect.
Okay.
Because if you're too tall, then the setup is horrible.
Yeah.
But if you're too short, then when you go for the crux move and you hit the right hand, then your left foot doesn't stay.
Yeah.
And you have to core in so hard that it's almost maybe like a different climb altogether.
I can see that.
So there's like this perfect height, and I would suggest that I'm on the very low end of that perfect height.
Okay.
I had worked that move so many times that I had it really figured out as to exactly how to push my toe down.
Nice.
And really core in. I think somebody that's there's maybe another 1 to 3 inch height that would be perfect, and if you got long arms, it helps.
Yeah. What is your height?
5'7".
Okay.
Yeah, +4.
So, that's a nice combination.
Yeah, so it helped on that climb for sure. Yeah.
Interesting.
But that it is very specific. But you're right, it is like a board climb. But if you aren't the type of person who is willing to just get your ass handed to you on one move time and time again, then it's probably not the climb that you're going to want to do. And I think that could be part of why I think that in the Boulder Fields we have hard climbs that are more resistance based, but we have a lot of hard climbs that are just heinously hard moves.
For sure.
And so, yeah, like there's more in there too. Like Where's Wildo, also extremely difficult, and it packs like 3 or 4 really hard moves together.
Okay, so
But
that one's more cruxy.
it's like I've never done another move like No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Okay.
There's nothing else I can think of that I've ever touched in the Okanagan like that.
Gotcha.
But Where's Wildo puts together some pretty hard moves all in a row.
So that one's the more power endurance.
Yeah. But I'd say like Jay put up a lot of more power endurance-y type stuff.
Gotcha.
Like there's probably 4 or 5 14 pluses in the Okanagan and many 13s or harder. And who knows, right? Because almost none of them have been repeated.
I could see it. I mean, I've tried a lot of 13s. Well, not a lot. I've tried a good handful of 13s.
Yeah.
Alberta, Squamish.
Yeah.
The move on No More Mr. Nice Guy was like way up there. That was like...
It was at
ridiculous.
a time when our grading was so bad too, right? Like we never thought we'd hit V8. And then we were like climbing in other areas and doing V8s, and we're like, oh, okay, so we're there. And then we thought, okay, well, we're definitely never going to get to 10. And then sure enough, same thing. And then there were years that we didn't travel as much. And so we thought there was no way we could ever go past maybe 12. And so there were all these things in the fields that are like, I think we've kind of tweaked them now, a lot of them. But Nice Guy was the only thing we ever called 12.
Okay.
And then we started to go traveling again a bit more, and you start doing those things in other places, and you're like, oh, okay, so we're like way off again. And so then we've had to so I think it's a bit messy when you get to some of that stuff.
Gotcha.
So some of the hard stuff is pretty hard, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
For sure.
And there's like a lot of people don't know there's so many. Like the fields has a ton of stuff that are like in those harder Canadian ranges anyways.
Definitely.
Cougar now too has a bunch of those as well.
Nice.
Yeah. But again, I think when Squamish is where it is and Leavenworth is where it is, and a lot of people in Calgary have stuff closer to home now.
Yeah.
I think that we're starting to see less people here trying the really hard stuff. Yeah. People come with a tick list and they want to send stuff. They don't want to get handed a new one.
Yeah, I wonder how long it would take for the local community to mature enough. So I think I could be off basis, but it seems like the local communities in Alberta, maybe Squamish, maybe I'm misspeaking there, but the smaller communities, maybe this would count as that, just take time to mature. It takes time to produce the high level climbers, and also takes people getting into it very, very young too. Yeah. So do you think this community could mature to the point where they are putting out 14s or 15s in the future?
I think that we have, I would say, when I say we, I mean the old farts. What I think has happened, I mean, COVID's a thing that happened for sure. Right. But I do think that when we started climbing social media and when we started climbing hard, we didn't even have cell phones. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I didn't, and maybe a couple of the guys did. And social media wasn't a thing. And so I think that's really changed it. And I would say we've seen guys come through locally that were way stronger than us. Okay. But it takes the right mix of things and the right situations to be able to produce a climber that's going to really go at those things. For sure. I don't know that we just haven't had it in the last number of years. And I'd say there's people that are strong enough. I've talked to them too. Okay. You know who you are. But they aren't pushing to that next level. Okay. And I think that part of it is because it takes a mentality of being okay with not sending things regularly. Right. And so that's why I say hard climbing around here now is guys are sending some of our 11s maybe into the 12s that'll probably get downgraded in the next book. And at a time those things were going up weekly, right? So I think there's just a bit of a generational shift. I think there's a lot of other social factors that come into it. My hope is that we get another group that comes through that really wants to push, because I think Nice Guy's on, is it a decade this year of not having a repeat? Wow. And it's had some serious attempts, but not anybody that's really sieged it since. So interesting. And that's kind of the way that all the really hard stuff around the valleys sitting right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Previously, you had mentioned you were getting stronger and stronger and misgrading things in the sandbag direction.
Yeah.
You just mentioned you're considering downgrading stuff though in the upper levels.
Yeah. I mean, I think, honestly, I don't really care, to be honest with you. But I think feedback on some lines is that they could be slashed, especially because there is, in a lot of places, there's a major height dependency on certain things.
Right.
So for some people, things are harder, some are easier, which is climbing, the nature of it in grading anyways. But
Yeah. Just go climb is like that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, somebody will probably come after me if I downgrade that thing, but it really, for some people, it should be.
Yeah.
And they will provide, a lot of people will provide honest feedback on that. If you are tall enough to do a certain set of beta on that climb, it does change it.
Yeah.
If you're shorter, then it's really tough. So some of those types of things, there's some slash grades in there already. There might be some slash grading. There'll be some downgrades. There's been breakage on stuff.
For sure.
Other things are going up. Like a lot of stuff could easily go up in the next book too.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's still a group of people around that have a ton of knowledge that are providing input for all that type of stuff. So
Okay.
yeah.
In terms of grades, I do find there's like two different camps of mentality, or probably more than that, but two that I've noticed, where you have people that are, say, logging or writing down their ascents with the grade they think it is. And then there's the people who are, I don't know, taking a grade. I don't understand the taking of a grade. It's like the point is you put in some consensus for what the grade is of this rock. I don't know what there is to take from that.
I would suggest that mentality is part of the reason why, when you say like the progression in a local area isn't maybe going where it was for difficulty. And I mean, I guess the other thing too is, like, we've been talking a lot about difficulty. I'm not all about difficulty all the time. There's so many amazing climbs at all grades, but yes, I think there's reasons, right? Like, I know I did when I was younger. I would take the grade of something that was suggested, even if it didn't feel right, because it was maybe one of the first climbs of that grade for me.
Yeah, that does happen.
Right? And I was like, maybe not too sure of what it really was, but maybe I was like, that felt a little off. But I do know 100% that people go around and they try and pluck off the softies. And there's, people are going to rip on me for this, but there's a lot of people here have this thing we call the Hard Bro Soft Tour.
Okay.
And it's a series of climbs in the boulder fields that are probably a little bit soft. Well, you mentioned one of them.
Fair.
And everybody will take the grade for those things.
Okay.
But then not maybe and what's sad is that there are climbs at the same grade they obviously are harder, they feel harder, and they don't get as much action. But you will see every spring on those climbs, you will see a lot of people because they probably are going to get their first of those grades.
Yeah. Do you think there's any connection from the guidebook claiming that it's a top 100 and it getting more repeats? Or Just Go Climb is a top 100, right?
Oh man, we can it is, yeah, for sure.
Do you think there's top 100s that are especially stiff though, like maybe Baby Cthulhu, or like
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Yeah. No More Mr. Nice Guy. I think it's only in the book as a 13 maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that one would be wrong. But that would be very stiff. There are definitely some that are on the harder end, on the top 100. And like as a guidebook author, I mean, we have a lot of responsibility when you're writing a book, but you can honestly change the usage patterns of an area by how you write a guidebook, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
I could put those 1-star climbs in the guidebook as top 100s, and I can guarantee you they're going to all of a sudden get a lot of repeats, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's that for sure. And I think if the grade might be a little bit easier than some people might think, then that makes it more popular. I also think that, again, with social media and people wanting to show that they've done things, and the hype that comes with that also makes those softies a little bit more appealing for people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of different factors that influence all that. Like I give an example often, like some people hated me for doing this, but it was just a little social experiment. And I set maybe one of my favorite climbs ever a long time ago in the old Beyond the Crux.
Okay.
Really nice flowy roof climb. And I sandbagged the hell out of it. And people hated it because it was so frustrating for them. And then I went back and later on set almost the same climb, but I made it super soft. Everybody loved it.
Right.
So yeah, there's that whole aspect of climbing too.
Definitely.
I think like a lot of the guys that develop still and are developing hard, they don't even want to put numbers on things a lot of the time now. And they're comparing really, like they're saying this felt harder than this, and whatever that means is what it means.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be very honest. I do think I fall into that trap every once in a while where, of course, you like an ego boost, right?
Yeah.
You get the ego boost, some dopamine, and that's definitely going to sway your perspective of your experience.
Yeah.
Versus you just getting shut down by something, right?
Totally. And climbing's kind of, it's got all those pieces to it, and I think all those pieces there's a lot of pieces that are valuable in that too.
Mm-hmm.
Because for somebody that might be the motivation that takes them to the next one and the next one, and then all of a sudden they're climbing at a very high level, or they're very satisfied or fulfilled with what they're doing. So that's fair enough, right? But I think that sometimes, there's a mindset of let's only climb the softies.
Fair.
Yeah,
fair.
and that does miss. Like that, unfortunately, there are climbs in the boulder fields that have seen maybe less than 10 attempts since they were put up in the last 10 years, and
Wow.
they're great climbs.
Would you happen to have any on top of your head that you'd
Oh man,
recommend?
yeah. Well, all those ones of Braden's that he just put up have seen, I don't know if they've even seen any attempts really much.
If you're talking about ones not in the guidebook,
Yeah.
do you think that's because, to be honest, I only even learned about Brandon, I think a month ago or something. Like, it doesn't seem like he sprays about the stuff he does too much. So, like, do you think it's partially because people don't know it exists, or?
I think the people that are here know.
Okay.
Like the people that are climbing in that range that are here, most of them know, and they know where they are.
Gotcha.
So I think if there were people traveling from out of town, they wouldn't know that stuff for sure.
Right.
But yeah, there's other stuff that's been developed for many years that hasn't had a lot of action, sadly. Like where's Wildo? That's a hard climb, but I think it saw maybe a couple attempts in the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And it's a really cool climb.
Interesting.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff in the North Fields, I'd say the Sherpa wall, slippery, some of those types of things, they now seem to be very quiet. There was a time when they were quite busy, and especially in the summer, like they're cold in the summer, so you can get really, really good attempts. But again, they're tougher climbs, and they require some stubbornness for sure. But yeah, they're just not getting much love.
I wouldn't be surprised too if part of that is beta videos.
Yes.
I think anytime there's a beta video with a climb, it's probably going to double easily the amount of cents on it.
Totally.
Sure.
That's a thing too. I used to watch, long time ago, I used to watch beta videos, and I stopped because I found that almost everybody that was on those videos was taller than me.
Okay.
And a lot of the time the beta didn't work for me.
Interesting.
So it came down to like, I luckily climb with people sometimes that are around my height.
Okay. Is Brandon?
Braden's like he's pretty much, we're almost the same height.
Okay.
Climb very similarly, but we have very different strengths at times too. So.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's fun when you can climb with people like that. But a lot of beta videos for me were not super helpful.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
But yeah, you're right. That's what I say. Like, you can change the traffic pattern of a climbing area based on how you write a guidebook, what you share on social media, beta videos, all that kind of stuff, which can be dangerous too, right? Like in certain areas, certain climbs shouldn't be accessed. They might be out of bounds, or they might be sensitive at certain times of year, right? So, yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happens when you interview in a park.
Yeah.
But that's good.
Yeah.
I would be curious, where do you kind of see your climbing taking you in 5-10 years? Are you still digging in? Are you still
Yeah.
doing your same old developing? Are you?
It's funny, like I mentioned, like just in the last few years, there's like I've stepped away from some of the political pieces of it.
Right.
And again, it actually is really funny because if you're not posting things on social media, people think you died. And so a lot of people think that myself and a couple others don't climb at all anymore. But in fact, actually, we're having some of the best times ever climbing in the last couple of years because it's kind of helped us to move outside of some of the main areas we've always been in, and there's a lot of rock in the Okanagan, so we are now kind of developing and finding new stuff all over the place.
Right.
So where do I find myself going? I think my hope is to have another guidebook out, well, within that time for sure.
Yeah.
And my guess is that somebody else would have to take on another one after that, probably.
Okay.
I have a huge list of projects on the go right now. So I'm also really busy at work. I'm right now finishing my master's degree.
Okay.
I'm coaching my kid in basketball. Wow. So I think like my climbing looks different than it did before my kid was born and when he was young. It's more of a like stay ready to really kind of attack those times that you have time. So like I try and like it's been brutal this summer and the heat was horrible this summer too, but getting back into it now, we're like starting to do a lot more like steep training climbing.
Okay.
And then be ready for days like, well, it rained yesterday, but tomorrow is going to be a really good day.
Yeah.
So when those days come and they come in bunches, that's kind of when I try and like line up sending something.
Nice.
And I kind of feel like that might be my climbing for the next number of years.
Nice.
So yeah, but my job is demanding.
Yeah.
And it involves like travel now too. So there's that, but I think it's kind of getting more under control, and my master's will be done in the spring. So I see maybe a little bit of a renaissance coming, hopefully. But as far as how long the body will last, that's a whole nother conversation. I'm actually now the most kind of motivating thing for me that I see now is older guys climbing hard.
Okay.
Like Sharma with his result yesterday, like I just thought that was like amazing, right? And so to see guys still pushing that hard, and I totally think it's possible. Do I think there's actually like, I'm sure somebody's going to find some insanely hard climbs that we overlooked in the Okanagan. But I mean, I've had a really good look in a lot of places, and there are a handful of things that are probably 15, 16, that actually physically aren't possible for me because I don't have either the wingspan or the hand to foot. And so I think for me personally, the stuff that I'm really looking at is maybe not as hard as what's been done for me before.
Gotcha.
But it's in the range, and maybe be able to pull one out sometime.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you ever taken photos of these potential 15, 16s maybe, or have you ever considered potentially publicizing them in some way for pro climbers to maybe?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah, we did, and when we sent things, we did, and we would message people that we knew were very strong.
Right.
And
I heard Muller's been on No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah. There's a lot of like, if you think of some of the very strong, maybe not right now, but like in the last 10 years, strongest guys in Canada, I'd say a good handful of them have tried the hardest stuff in there.
Right.
Some from the US as well. But I think, again, it's just kind of, it is a little bit of an obscure area. And we often would get into the trap of like people would come up to Squamish. They were planning on coming here, but then they had more they wanted to do in Squamish and they never came here.
That's fair.
So I have, and I've directly sent some of these photos and like even like photos of like the holds and stuff to some people, and no takers yet.
Yeah.
But
there's so much rock everywhere. It's sometimes hard to pull people to your rock.
That's the thing. I think now there is so much rock being developed around different parts of, well, the world, but in Western North America, there's a lot of stuff getting developed.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hard climbs in a lot of those places. So it's hard to come all the way here when you might be really enjoying something closer to home.
Okay.
Because I mean, for me, it's always been that way too. Like, as soon as we got into the hard stuff here, I hardly was able to go anywhere else without like feeling like I was missing something here.
Right.
Yeah. But we've expanded where we're developing now too. We're kind of, our region has gotten bigger as to where we're going, and maybe some of the best boulders I've ever developed are not quite here in the Okanagan, and they're really fun, and everything ends up being harder than expected.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the dream a bit. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm psyched that you're still developing. I want to climb it all. So,
Yeah. Well, hey man, again, people think you die if you're not on social media. But there's still people that we're going out with, and other people are finding boulders and like pulling us out to those places and being like,
That's
hey,
awesome.
is this something that's worth developing? And like, yeah, we're still doing all that. So yeah, if you want to go look at stuff, I'm happy to show you.
I would love that. That'd
Yeah.
be great.
Yeah, cool.
For sure. Maybe as we kind of wind down here, is there maybe a funny story, or maybe like a very memorable memory throughout your years developing here? Any kind of closing, just humor you'd like to?
There's lots,
Yeah.
honestly. Like, not too long ago when we were up at the boulder fields, people would ask how the names of things came to be.
Okay.
And the group of guys that developed around here, part of the reason it was so fun is it was a pretty humorous group of people, and we could like go at each other pretty good, and everybody took it really well. But
Nice.
yeah, a lot. If you look at the guidebook, there's some names. Of course, there's always inappropriate names too, but there's some names in there that to some might not make any sense. But for example, the shoe thief, this is one of many examples. Like, Jay developed the shoe thief cave.
Okay.
And we'd all looked at it for years, but he finally went in and started developing it. And so I was on my way to the North Fields to project some stuff down there, and I could see Jay walking out of kind of the shoe thief intricate simplicity area.
Okay.
And he had no shoe on, and then one shoe on the other
Yeah.
foot. And the reason that cave is named Shoe Thief is because he lost one of his shoes down that cave, and he had to
Oh,
walk all the
damn.
way out of the boulder fields. And if you know where that is,
Yeah.
that's not a short walk with one shoe on it and then a barefoot on the other one.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, but there's all kinds of names in there that are, well, all through the Okanagan that are like that, and only a small group of people might know why they're named that, right? Which I think is,
For sure.
in most climbing areas, it's like that. But when you hear about the stories behind it, it's always fun. Yeah.
Man, in regards to these caves, have you ever gone down in them, or
Oh yeah,
seen how far they go?
We've gone into, so you can actually, there's spots in the Boulder Fields is a really cool place because there's so many different activities happening in there now. Like, you've got climbing, of course, so bouldering, trad, sport. There's caving in there too. Like,
Nice.
and they go quite far down into some of those caves. And then there's geocaching, all that kind of stuff. But some of those caves, when you get into them, and we've gone quite deep into some to see if, and there are climbs, like
Yeah.
if somebody wants to go in there. And I often think about like, what's the next age of development going to be in some of our areas. And in the boulder fields, you could go down into caves if you had the lights.
Yeah.
And you could be putting up an entire new generation of climbs in the caves.
The sub area.
Yeah.
The underworld.
Yeah, exactly. Because you would have there's boulders on top that are
Yeah.
developed, right? So then you just go underneath, and we've developed caves that are more like somewhat superficial. That's kind of an oxymoron, but the ones that are closer to the surface. But there have been a couple guys that have gone quite far down and put things up in there.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Would they have been more recent, like in the guidebook, or?
Some are in the guidebook, like if the Ice Talons, for example, has, and that's up in the Driven area.
Okay.
There's a cave that, like, you go into Ice Talons, which is a really beautiful overhang, but right, like, you got to climb through a little rock area, and then down and in to the right of that, there's a cave down there that
Gotcha.
you climb out of. And that's just like one example of that.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the boulder fields. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go check it out.
Yeah, that one's,
For sure.
I think it was like a V8 or something like that.
Okay.
But again, like, there's better V8s in there for sure. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, anything you'd want to let anybody know? Any closing remarks?
Oh, I mean, I think I often say I was very lucky to be part of a bouldering development, really, like the boom of a development in a place like this. The people made it so much more fun, but the rock, what we're able to do in the time, and I hope that people continue to enjoy it, and I hope that they do so in a respectful manner.
Right.
I mean, anytime you're developing and putting in trails and all that, anybody could argue that that's not necessarily environmentally friendly too, right? But I think if we can all kind of operate on a similar set of ethics and respect, then it makes areas just that much more enjoyable.
For sure.
And this has always been a place that had a very positive development mindset to it, and I was always really happy with that. So, and then I hope that the next generation of climbers coming behind us here really kind of like pushes the next level. We've been waiting for that for a long time. So, and I'm seeing it in other places. So I really hope that it happens here too.
Yeah, me as well.
Yeah.
And I hope they put out videos so that I can personally watch them and enjoy them and get more psych happening. Yeah,
I mean, it would be really cool to see on some of the lines here that are really that hard, like to see the process of somebody else going at it, because I know what my process was, but it'd be really cool to see what that looks like for someone else too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
As a climbing nerd, I would definitely like to see that process. In fact, I would like to have that process.
Yeah. Well, I'd like on Nice Guy, the process was different than anything I'd ever done before, right? Because it was such a learned movement.
Right.
And like you say, getting into the positions, learning how to stick the crux hold. I like the tactics used on that were something like it changed my climbing, really. Yeah. I learned a lot from that.
How did you feel actually standing on top of that thing after all that effort, all that time?
So I always used to try, so there's a larger story. That climb was found by Jay, or Aaron Culver, I think, and Jay maybe was there too.
Okay.
And they came to me right away and they're like, you got to try this thing. Because Jay has a different style. He's incredibly good at really burly and especially long climbs. And so that probably wasn't going to be his jam. So they came to me. They put up a couple things on the boulder right away, and then so on the left side there's the other stuff. And they came to me and said, "Man, you got to come look at this." And I actually didn't go look at it until a little bit later, and then immediately fell in love with it. So in the Okanagan, as you know, the spring is not bad. It's pretty cool. And we had a good spring, and I had a really good bunch of sessions into the early summer, and then it got hot. But I just kept pushing hard. And what happens is usually the third or so week of August, we start to get way cooler nights in the boulder fields especially. And so I knew that time was coming, and so I just kept pushing and pushing. And all summer it was so hot that I couldn't get the thumb wrap on that left hand laser cut hold. So it was good in the spring as I was learning it, and then in the summer I didn't have that, and it was more open-handed, and I had to keep working the moves. And then when it cooled off, that came back.
Nice.
So I actually stuck the crux move one night, and but it wasn't from the start. I was just working the crux. And I had I completely forgot what to do. You know how that is sometimes? So it was what happened. And I completely forgot what to do and fell off, and I was in amazement that it finally had happened. And then a couple nights later is when I finally sent it. And when I was on top of that, I was like, holy, I knew it was a next level, but maybe not where it is now. I didn't know it was that hard.
For sure.
Because you lose all objectivity of when you're on something that long and trying it like that. It's just, you just have no idea how hard it really is sometimes. So it was quite the feeling for sure, to the point where for the rest of that summer, I was on a major drain. Everything, all the emotions, everything just went poof. People that, I think maybe not just people that are climbing really hard stuff, I think people that are climbing almost anything that put that much time into something and you're that focused on it, physically and emotionally, I've heard lots of people say that for months after, they have a hard time trying hard again. And I had that experience for sure. Yeah.
It's an interesting reaction. I was going to ask, after you sent that, did you have any desire to go test yourself on like maybe Squamish 14s or 13s, right, or
yeah,
just to even see how the grade compared?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an interesting reaction where you were like deflated of your energy.
I couldn't have, and it took until almost till it snowed. I found, what did I get on after that? Nothing even close to that for difficulty, but I started to get back into some other harder climbs, and I think I was able to finish one thing before it started to snow. But that whole fall season was pretty much like just climb other stuff. Yeah. I was not in the mental space. And other guys I know that have recently done some pretty hard things, they haven't got back to that place yet. Yeah. It takes a lot. Like you got to have something that's really motivating you to be willing to put the time into that type of stuff, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's how that one felt. I've had other ones that were different though. Like when I did Wildo, I was so excited, and I think sometimes we forget when we're projecting things how much strain we're putting on the same parts of our body all the time. And Wildo is a very wide compression-y, like it's on a face, but the holds are really compression-y.
Okay.
So a lot of strain through the lower back. And after sending it, I immediately ran over the same day to another project, and I did this huge cross move, and I like rotated my entire spine. Holy. And I was out for 2 months of climbing after that. Jeez. So yeah, I've had kind of both things where you're really excited and you go try something really hard again.
Yeah.
Didn't turn out well for me, so.
Wow. When you say rotate your spine, are we talking not like a slip disc or something?
Yeah, like the discs went, and then also like it went out of, like it was a little bit out of alignment too.
Wow.
Because I guess I was constantly on Wildo. You're doing these like big catch compression moves like this, so you're constantly engaging and really squeezing hard. Yeah. And like even when I'm doing this now, like I can feel where it's going, right? And so when I did this huge cross move on this other project, and honestly it's a terrible climb too, so I don't even know why I did it, but I did that cross move, and like immediately when I hit the hold, it kind of latched, and then I could just feel like, I was like, oh, that's not nice.
Ah, that's a shame.
Yeah, like, and then I had like sciatic, like everything was down into my leg. Yeah.
For where's Waldo in this wide compression? Are you hitting like small little crimps, or are you? Yeah,
it starts in so it's also super steep.
Right. Like a 60.
It's probably similar to Nice Guy.
Okay.
I remember measuring it, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it's similar. Cool. And you kind of go up into some small edges. And the first part of the climb, the first few moves aren't too bad, and then it starts getting like really, like you're really moving hard, catching holds as you like are ready to come back.
Yeah.
And so on the right hand, it's a lot of edges, and on actually both hands, they're all edges pretty much. Yeah. There's a couple really hard moves on that too. Like there's a left hand move where you come out of an undercling situation and you're catching a tiny hold, but your whole body is wanting to pull you and rotate you backwards.
Gotcha.
So you got to catch, and everything is like that. And then it finishes with a dyno at the end too. So like not a terrible dyno, but it's you can't mess it up kind of dyno.
Yeah. That sounds full value.
Yeah, it's really good. Like I say, it's got probably 4 intro moves that are hard but not terribly hard, 4 very hard moves in a row, and then a chuck to a jug at the end. And then it's a high ball top out, but like once you've got the jug, you can kind of rest for a while. So
nice.
Yeah.
Man, since I'll be staying up there for a long time with a lot of time on my hands, I should just go and walk over to it.
Yeah, like if you go, it's hard to explain because it's not in the guidebook where it is, but and it faces away from the parking lot. But if you go to Nice Guy and where Roof on Fire is, do you know where that is?
Honestly, I've tried to find that a few years ago. And I just got so lost.
So it would probably be a similar experience looking for Where's Wildo, but if you're at Roof on Fire, you just kind of keep walking north. And there's actually another series before. There's a wall back there, and on top of that wall, actually, there's the Dirty Hooker boulder. That boulder is amazing. Yeah, it's actually like 70 degrees. Holy! And it comes out of like a cave like this, and there's stuff up to like 12 plus on there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but one of the best is like a V6-ish beautiful roof line.
Okay.
Anyways, but as you're walking, there's the walls in the north of the fields, and if you get to those walls from Roof on Fire, and like you're going straight north, and you turn around and look backwards, that area actually has a number of really hard climbs in there.
Okay.
Because there's a few caves that are in that same spot.
For sure.
Yeah.
This actually cued. I was going to ask you about Kaya. Any thoughts on that? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Is it useful?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. I don't know if I should say them out loud.
No pressure.
I think it offers something to part of the community that likes that option. I don't like that the information in my book was used to populate it.
Okay.
That part I have a hard time with.
Like it wasn't, they didn't ask you for permission or anything like that?
They wanted to use my info for payment, but the guidebook was created by local developers that wanted a guidebook for the area, not an online app. So, it does. I honestly haven't looked at it. Some people have been sending pictures of some of the stuff. I think that it's not a comprehensive. It's not a comprehensive list of climbs from what I've seen. So I think it does solve a problem right now where there is no guidebook in print.
Okay.
I think that for some people also who would prefer to have an app than a guidebook, and probably at a price point, then that also is good. Almost everybody that I've talked to, and that's a lot of people about guidebook stuff, and that they want a guidebook.
Yeah.
And maybe they want both. So, yeah, I like guidebooks. I love I love what goes into them.
Definitely.
And I appreciate that it takes a lot of a community to put one of those together.
Yeah.
And that really was how, like, people that did a lot of development from when this place started were involved in that initial guidebook. So I like to try and value that and continue that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean the stories that come with the guidebooks, they're amazing. It would be actually great if there were more stories in there.
Yeah.
I don't think, or I actually haven't gone through the Kaya app, but I kind of doubt. I assume it's similar to 27 Craigs, where it's just all about the climbs. There's probably not a whole lot of stories or external info.
I think so. I think my understanding of it, because I've never used it, they're just, in any area, it's not my thing. Right. I think my understanding, and from what I've seen, is that it's maybe not the same quality as a guidebook would be for information. Okay. Maybe not the same type of descriptions, which is tricky here too, because we have so many holds on the rock that, starting holds are usually needing to be fairly well defined. And I think, you lose that connection with the stories and maybe with the people that actually did the work to develop the place, right?
Definitely.
I think it's a good resource for people though. Like, I think if you like videos and you like that video beta and all those types of things, I believe they host that on there. And for a lot of climbers now that maybe don't want to put as much time into the problem solving aspect of things, I think that works for them.
Yeah, which is interesting. Like, climbers are generally people who enjoy solving problems, and it's I would say the Kaya app definitely takes away a bit of that. It definitely makes finding boulders a bit easier when you simply...
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
You have like GPS. I mean, you can't really beat it. But there is the aspect of like bumblefucking around trying to find something for...
Which you do in the boulder fields for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff in that guidebook that even with a ton of pictures and maps and all kinds of stuff, you're still not going to get there always easily. For sure. And so having the GPS that Kaya offers, I think that's a benefit for some people. But yeah, I think that it's not my jam, and I think maybe there's a generational piece to that too. Yeah. And I know a lot of people that really want the guidebook and they're waiting for the guidebook and they're not getting involved with the app. So yeah.
It is helpful when your guidebook doesn't run out of battery, or
that's true. But it's also not so great when the guidebook is like this thick.
Yeah, that is
it's
true.
Heavy as hell. Yeah. But and I say that because I'm like, the next one's going to be split into 3. But honestly, the Central Okanagan book alone will be as big as the current book is, right? At least. Wow. So, But the one thing is that I think that the guidebook will be more comprehensive. At least that's my what I know. I might not know of all the climbs that have been done by certain people, but I know a lot of people are still sending a lot of information my way.
Okay.
And then also just there's a lot of stuff that is missing on that Kaya app as of right now, anyways, from what I've heard. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to buying those new guidebooks.
yeah, thanks. They're in progress. It's one of those things where you have to always with guidebooks you have to cut it off at some point when an area is still being developed.
Yeah.
I think we're on the slower end of development these days in certain places, so it will be easier to actually be a bit more comprehensive.
Okay.
But I mean, things are always changing. Like even just the number of grades or broken holds or all those types of things since the last book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems like an impossible task, keeping track of everything.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Thousands and thousands of boulders.
Yeah.
Jesus.
The first one, man, like that was an undertaking. The second book is going to be, I mean, it's a different stage of life for me right now too. But
more experience too, maybe.
Yeah, and I have the entire template of the first book to lean on, right?
Yeah.
So that's nice. I mean, I think a lot of people nowadays forget that there were other guidebooks of the boulder fields prior to to that book, right? Like there was a sport climbing book that Yanni and Hannah did that included some bouldering in it, and then I actually wrote a little paper guidebook for the boulder fields that had like 400 of the problems in it to start, and that's what built into the bigger book now.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, the next one will probably be maybe the last one for me. I don't know, maybe like somebody might go in there with an entire different view of what could be developed. I know there's a ton of stuff in there still. If somebody's willing to put their life on the line or climb some things that require like 20 pads.
Yeah.
The boulder field still has a ton of stuff like that in the harder range that could be done. And then there's still hundreds and hundreds of easier climbs that just aren't getting developed too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, actually, I just remembered by Slash and Torn, but not up at that elevation. It's a bit lower.
Yep.
So I'm forgetting the exact name of
Discworld area?
Yeah.
Yep.
There's some climbs that are underneath this like quite long...
The cave?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know anything about that, but I've heard that there's 12, 13 or something.
There's a 14 in there.
14 in there.
Yeah, that's one of Jay's 14s.
Okay.
So I started climbing... Actually, Jay and I started climbing that thing together years ago. And then I started going at it and was getting close-ish on it. I would say like not close descending, but
Okay.
I had done all the moves and was starting to link them together. And then I got totally distracted with other things like Where's Wildo and
Right.
Slippery had broken. I was going back to do everything on there. And Jay got in there, and that is Jay's style. Like, because a couple of the moves were really long for me too,
Okay.
and Jay's taller. So, yeah, he spent some time in there and he finished up. I think that one is called Men at Arms. There's a few different lines in there.
Gotcha.
It's such a weird little cave though, right? Because it's only like this high off the ground.
Yeah.
But like the climbing in there is so good and it's so hard.
So I have gone underneath there, and I haven't seen a description for where it starts or goes. Is it like a left to
right to left?
Right to left. So like if you enter coming down from the parking lot.
Yep.
I guess you're going to be traveling just further down.
Yeah. So you come in through there's the corridor that has the climbs on the right boulder. There's actually another might be a 10 on that boulder in the cave actually.
Okay.
Most people don't know it's there. But yeah, you go into that cave and you can walk all the way through it and come out the other end.
For sure.
Yeah, so if you're walking through, you're going to come out the other end, the climbs they start on the right-hand side, down at the base. They're in the middle-ish of the cave.
Okay.
And yeah, you start kind of obviously sitting, and you work your way up and left.
Up and left to the farther exit.
Yeah, to the other exit. And you kind of get into this, you climb those beautiful in-cutty type holds in the roof, and then you get into these huge moves that are into compression. And then actually the finish is really tricky too. Damn. So Jay did a good job on that one. So yeah, there's that. There's stuff like that most people don't know about all through the fields.
Yeah, that one probably a few grades too hard for me at the moment, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely excited to get on it in the
And
future.
it's fun. Like, I don't know, again, this is my mindset on things too, is that even when things were too hard, I still really enjoyed playing on them.
Right.
I would get my ass kicked, but
So is that one more of a power endurance one?
Yeah.
That you could kind of build into a bit more?
There's no heinously hard move on it,
Okay.
but it's got a lot of moves on it. So
Actually, how many, loosely off the top of your head, do you think there
geez.
is?
There's
Is it
probably
20 plus? Or?
15 to 20, yeah.
Okay.
I think by the time you get out, there's a lot of tricky moves at the end coming out of that cave. So yeah, it's probably up in that 20 range then.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. And it's so certain times a day, because of the way the light comes into that cave from the two sides. Certain times of day are better to be able to see the holds better.
Gotcha.
I had lights in there at some times, and then it's kind of one of the caves that doesn't get too cold. Actually, like we get a lot of really cold caves up there in the summer. Cougar too.
Yeah.
But that one actually stays a bit warmer. So when the weather turns in the fall, it can be snowing and you can be like projecting hard in that cave.
That's awesome.
Yeah. You would probably not want to have too much snow because you won't get out of the parking lot. But yeah, you can do it for sure. Yeah.
Wow, that's super cool.
Yeah. But like I said, again, there's so many things like that in there. And like Braden and I were just talking the other night about the hard lines, and we get a bit, I think, when you put that much work into developing the area and some of the harder climbs, you get a little bit sad when they're not getting done or any action.
Yeah.
But I think we have to realize that other areas nearby are getting bigger and they're getting more climbs like that.
For sure.
And they are just a little more approachable than some of the stuff around here.
Yeah. Some of these climbs, though, are somewhat unique. I haven't seen a climb like No More Mr. Nice Guy or this Men-at-Arms boulder in this, like, ridiculously horizontal and long cave. Like,
or Baby Cthulhu, like that's actually that's what's on the back of my shirt. Those things are not in most places.
Yeah.
Like Waco Tanks has some stuff like that. Joe's Valley maybe has some features like that, but like not a lot of places have climbs like that.
Definitely not Alberta.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it looks, some of the stuff that I think that crew out there that's developing, obviously Frank was done a long time ago, but or not a long time ago, but it's been well developed. Other areas though, in the last number of years, especially because what COVID forced people to have to do and stay closer to home, now they're just going crazy in those spots. And I think that's another reason why less hard climbs are getting done in some of the other places like here, is people just don't need to travel as much anymore. Yeah. And they've got all those new climbs close to home, right?
Yeah, but definitely, I can't think of any climbs in Alberta that would compare to, like you said, Baby Cthulhu or
fair
No
enough.
More Mr. Nice Guy or even Men-at-Arms.
Yeah.
It's, the rock quality too, it's like a level above, I think.
Yeah,
what we
climbing on like bulletproof gneiss is pretty tough to beat. Like sandstone's great, but I haven't seen much sandstone that's as solid as what we got here. And like you think about crouching in Cougar or the Mistress in Cougar, like those features are pretty hard to find. Driven, Serenity, like all those boulders are, and we have so many of them. They're just so high quality. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, it's a yearly vacation for me coming out
is it?
here.
Nice. Well, how long are you here for?
This trip, I don't actually have a deadline or an ending to it. It's just kind of just whenever I get burnt out.
Oh yeah, nice. Okay. If you come back in this time of year next year, let me know, because Cougar's gonna have a bunch of new. Like it already has a bunch of new stuff.
Okay.
There will be more for sure by then.
I'd be totally down.
Yeah, and it's nice this time of year. It's, and again, easier on the vehicle too.
For sure.
Yeah.
That being said, I drive like an old shitty van, so
nice.
I just romp over all that washboard.
Yeah.
Hit every pothole.
How's the road up there right now? Because I know in the spring it was a bit better this year.
I would say it's got less large rocks and like less potholes.
Yeah.
A bit more washboard, but I think I would take washboard over like vehicle damaging rocks and holes and stuff.
Yeah, so, for sure. Yeah.
But
yeah, I think that's one of the things that slows people from coming up that place as much. A lot more going out to the holiday for a lot of people now is the Kootenays.
Right.
Because they're blowing that place up with development right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever made a trip down there?
Yeah, I'm actually developing some stuff out that way right now.
Sick.
Well, I say right now, it's been over the last 3 years, but like I say, some of the best, so like I'm talking like flat grass landings,
Wow.
or like hillside, but beautiful, easy to build landings. And every single problem I've been on ended up to being, like, in boulders, they fall, and sometimes they fall and they fall and it's all slab on all sides.
Yeah.
And you just cry. And you're like, if that boulder would have just gone like upside down,
Yeah.
it would be amazing. Well, that's what happened in some of these areas I'm developing out there.
Okay.
Is they all fell in the right way.
That's awesome.
And everything is just, it's heinously hard. Like, you think you're going to go in and be able to hammer off a number of climbs in a trip.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't do any.
Wow.
And and the quality's great, the rock's great. And there's a lot of rock in that entire part of British Columbia. So like, I've gone past slides that I haven't even had a chance to get into yet. And they're right on the side of you go across the highway and you're there. So
For sure.
yeah. So it's kind of like, here we're picking off a lot of the stuff that we missed or that wasn't as obvious, but there you're picking off like the obvious stuff that's just
The king line
the
still.
king line still.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's been trying to convince me for the last 2 or 3 years to go there with him.
Oh yeah.
The schedules keep on not aligning.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It's on the to-do list for sure.
It's really like the climbing is great. They've done a really good job of developing a lot of stuff out there. But I think like for people that are looking for the low double digits and below, they got a lot of stuff now. And most of the approaches are like not that far on good trails.
Yeah.
Landings are good. Some of the stuff is like park your car and walk in the bush and you're right there. It really reminds me of Leavenworth that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be like small town kind of vibes in the area too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And it's not gotten, I think at times of the year, like I think coming up here at the end of the month or October, I think the trip that people used to take to Leavenworth all the time is now a trip to the Kootenays
Okay.
for some people. And that gets busy there. So I've seen it where there's like a lot of people in some of the areas, which is kind of surprising, but generally it's quiet. The only problem is it gets hot. The summers are hot like here. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. They have some areas that are cool too, like the
Yeah.
Boulder Fields, but not like the Boulder Fields. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. But worth the trip for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Andy White, for being so generous with your time for one.
Oh,
and,
no problem. Yeah.
Yeah, sharing all your experience, your history here.